Welcome to the YWCA Hartford Region Week Without Violence video series. Today we have with us Karen Foley O'Connor of the network, the executive director of the network, who is going to share with us some resources and understanding about victims' rights and police interventions during domestic violence disputes. Karen, so glad to have you with us.
Hi, Melinda. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the YWCA for doing this. As Melinda said, I'm the executive director of the Network Against Domestic Abuse. It covers North Central Connecticut, is one of 18 regional advocacy agencies that provide domestic violence victims advocacy services across the state of Connecticut. These services include court advocacy, shelter and safe house placement, rapid rehousing, family and child advocacy, community education to our youth regarding healthy relationships, and basic human needs, as well as social and emotional health services. I'm new to this position. I just retired in February of 2020 after 25 years of serving as a Connecticut State Trooper. I still currently educate and train police officers in Connecticut regarding a compassionate response and informed response to domestic violence incidents, and am able to train hundreds of officers a year. I'm here today to talk to you about the role a police officer might play in a domestic violence incident. I want to start out by saying that we're bound by two policies. One is Connecticut General Statute, and the other is the statewide model policy for police response to family violence incidents. This policy was born out of the Family Violence Prevention Act of 2012. Prior to 2012, police departments all responded to family violence incidents slightly different. After the Family Violence Prevention Act, a model policy was developed and a governing council that oversees it was developed. This allows police officers across the state of Connecticut to respond universally to family violence incidents. So I'd like to talk first about what it is like in the state of Connecticut at a police response. First of all, if a police responds to a family violence incident, you have to realize that the number one concern of that police officer is the safety of the victim and the safety of the other responding officers. Also, rendering medical aid is the first priority as well if needed. A police officer will have to obtain statements, and if it's safe to do so, the officer will try to interview that victim outside of the presence of the offender. The police officer may need to photograph the scene and or injuries, and possibly interview other witnesses. While on scene, a police officer may also conduct something that's called a lethality assessment screen, lethality assessment program screen. This is a screen consisting of 11 questions that allows that officer to try to ascertain the safety of that victim in that home. Sometimes an officer may actually pick up the phone and call a victim's advocate and ask the victim to get on the phone with that victim's advocate. If the victim chooses not to get on the phone in the presence of the officer and wishes to do so in private, the officer will provide the victim with that number so that he or she may do so. If an arrest is made, an officer is required to explain to the victim the process of the arrest and the status of the offender, for example, if they're being held on bond. The police officer will also provide the victim with information regarding victim services that are available here in the state of Connecticut. As far as another piece of legislation that I'd like to discuss is it's Public Act 18.5, and it's referred to as the Dominant Aggressor Bill. This bill was passed in the legislative session of 2018 and was put into effect on January 1st of 2019. This allows, previously a police officer was required to arrest anybody that they established probable cause of a crime in a family violence incident. It was a mandate. This bill allows a police officer to make a decision and to choose to arrest just the dominant aggressor, okay? And I'm just going to give you the definition of a dominant aggressor is the person who poses the most serious and ongoing threat in a relationship or a situation involving a family violence crime. Realize that threat is the most serious and ongoing meaning it doesn't just involve the incident that occurred that night. Some of the key points that an officer considers when deciding if they're going to identify a non-dominant aggressor and a dominant aggressor is that whether one person may have been acting in self-defense, They'll look at the degree of injury between the two parties. If there's been any previous threats, again, not necessarily that evening. It could be another incident prior to that may or may not have been reported to the police, but threats of fear of physical injury towards one person in the relationship. Any history of violence, however the officer can obtain it, to determine that one person is the dominant aggressor. And the bottom line, the police officer just needs to consider the need to protect victims of domestic violence. There is some good news regarding this bill. From 2014 to 2018, the average percentage is approximately 17% of family violence arrests consists of dual arrests. In looking at 2019 data, since the passage of the bill, that rate has dropped to approximately 10%. The Connecticut Coalition of Domestic Violence will be releasing a report within the next few weeks detailing the statistics that I just provided you. I'm going to also speak to you regarding Public Act 15211, which is an act that allowed domestic violence victims the same rights regarding confidentiality of a sexual assault victim, which means in any releasable document, their names or identifiers will not be included. This continued on into 2019 when certain information which could previously be made available under the Freedom of Information requests are also confidential. This includes information like names and addresses. I'd like to conclude with a message. With the national conversation which is currently going on in our country, police officers understand that some victims of domestic abuse, especially in communities of color, have a mistrust of the police and may choose to not make a potentially life-saving phone call to the police. I want to assure you that police officers are continually trained regarding some of the laws that I just spoke to you about. I hope that this information I provided will give you the confidence to make that call to the police if you fear that you're in danger.